Welcome to the weekly update on the state of the nation. We are 2 weeks away from the general election and things are really hotting up. And today we've got our wonderful guest joining us on the state of the nation, and that is Prince Mashele. Prince, welcome back.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting me. I always enjoy
Another
with you.
Another discussion around the week that's brought to you by Pace Car Rental. If you need to hire a car, go and speak to Pace Car Rental. You can even get a discount if you quote our code, which is SONA, S-O-N-A. Prince, let's jump straight in. The big news of the last week, as electioneering is kind of winding down, has been the absolute, I've sort of invented a new word, Lusification of the ANC campaign, right? And that is where you just make promises whether they can work or not. And the biggest one of those promises that has been passed recently is the NHI, the National Health Insurance Bill, which is being signed into an act, right, which President Ramaphosa is signing.
Yeah, look, I mean, the ANC is aware that this is possibly the first West election they are going to experience. All polls, including those conducted by the party, indicate that the ANC will not cross the 50% mark. Then the ANC is panicking. There's a big panic in Luthula House as we speak. So they are trying their best to swing the vote. So this signing of the NHI by President Cyril Ramaphosa is an attempt to say to South Africans, look, we are doing something for you. Please give us a chance. It doesn't matter whether it will work or not. We know that it's not going to work. So after the elections, it's not as if the poor will walk into a private hospital and get treated after the election. It's not going to happen like that. There's a lot of money that need to be invested by the state, and the state doesn't have money. So it's not going to happen. But you're correct. It's part of the craziness of the elections done by a party that is panicking, the ANC.
They may be panicking, but is there a chance that it works?
What
the NHI, that kind of blatant action when it comes to an election where you make crazy promises?
Look, here's the thing. Anything that the state has touched in South Africa under the ANC over the past 30 years, if you look at the bigger picture, has actually turned to dust. So the ANC government was handed by the apartheid government hospitals, big hospitals, Baragwanath, Chris and Baragwanath, if you want, the biggest in South Africa. And look at what they did to that hospital. They messed it up. Even Cyril Ramaphosa himself, when his relatives are sick, he wouldn't want them to go to a public hospital, the very hospitals that he manages. So I don't have faith that this NHI thing, which if it's managed by the state, is going to work. It's going to mess up things. So what the state is trying to do, what the ANC is trying to do, they are trying to destroy the little that works that was created by the private sector. I mean, if you were to take South Africa today and say minus the private sector, South Africa would almost be a failed state. Roads that are full of potholes, hospitals that are dysfunctional, crime that is rampant. They can't even provide electricity except for this month because there's an election. Transnet that has collapsed. So if you ask me, will it work? No, it will be like Transnet. It won't work.
Yeah, because I think, and this isn't a debate about the NHI itself, but, so the ANC is trying to dress this up as if there's not government hospitals already. It's by far the biggest healthcare provider in the country. It's just run particularly badly, isn't it?
Correct.
There's nothing stopping them from doing a good job.
Every major township in South Africa has a big hospital. Just mention any. There is a big public hospital with massive facilities, by the way. If you trace the history of that hospital, whether Tembisa Hospital here in Gauteng, whether Matikwana Hospital in my township in Mkhuhlu, Just go trace that hospital, the performance of that hospital. This is what you're going to find, which is embarrassing. It used to work better under apartheid. It is in a worse state today under the ANC. Bottom line. So it's not as if the ANC has not had resources at its disposal to demonstrate whether it is capable of managing things or not. It has. But here is a record of the ANC, as I said earlier on. Whatever they touch, it turns into dust.
So that's what they're doing. And as we head into the election, they seem to be betting on these big gestures. One that they've sort of warmed up again has been the case against Israel, International Court of Justice. That's sort of, they're trying to get more publicity out of it. And to be fair to them, they seem to be polling a lot more. When we last sat doing weekly updates, which was a few weeks back, we spoke about their lackluster campaign and absence of posters, etc., which is still the case. But they've obviously doubled down by talking about their legacy. They wheeled out Thabo Mbeki. Now that's been an interesting tactic, because Thabo Mbeki went out there, and if he wasn't wearing a ANC T-shirt, it would almost look like he's campaigning. If you hear what he says, he's almost campaigning against the ANC.
Yeah, look, Thabo Mbeki told us that the ANC is full of criminals.
Yeah.
It's him. These words I'm using, criminals, right? He hasn't come back to us to tell us that the criminals have left the ANC. And by the way, if he is correct, the ANC is full of criminals. If you want a catalogue of ANC criminals, just go take the Zondo Commission report. You will see from Zizi Kodwa to Gwedema, Dashe, all of them, these are criminals, right? Now, the very same Thabo Mbeki who told us the ANC is full of criminals is now telling us to vote for criminals. That's very strange. That's why he bites his tongue each time he goes to campaign. He says, I know the ANC has problems, but vote for them. I mean, that's irrational. You say, vote for criminals. So he's biting his tongue because he knows that the party he's campaigning for is full of criminals. But you are right. Polls suggest that they are actually rising in terms of support. Hover around 45% now. It is because they have ramped up their campaign. They are now visible all over the show. I think that their campaign is going to give them a bit more, but they will still not cross the 50% mark.
Yeah.
And that is actually a big deal, which means they will have to negotiate a coalition deal with either of three parties, the DA, the EFF, or the IFP, depending on the performance of the ANC. So if you want to know, you are going to be governed by the ANC in partnership with the DA, or with the EFF, or with the IFP after the 29th of May.
Yeah, and obviously what has been interesting about that as we're getting closer to election day has been, certainly I found it very interesting. You know, we've seen the EFF behaving quite differently to the past, certainly Julius Malema. We haven't seen him in his overalls for a while. He's suddenly out there in suits. He's talking much more reasonably. Says nationalization of the banks is not nationalization of the banks. It's starting a national bank, which is a completely different thing to what they were saying a month ago. Obviously setting themselves up for this coalition.
Number one, Julius Malema and his friends in the EFF are literate. They can read and write. So they are reading all the results of the polls. And the results of the polls suggest that they are not going to grow as dramatically as they thought they would. Remember, initial polls 3 months ago placed the EFF around 18%. And now polls are placing them around 11%. So Julius psychologically is affected by this. Now, the other polls suggest that the majority of South Africans don't think that the EFF can actually be a responsible government, because their overalls are associated with chaos and violence. So what is Julius doing? He has ditched the red overalls and he now wears a suit like you and I, Mike. He's trying to look as decent as you and I, so that South Africans can begin to consider him as a possible responsible leader. That's what he is trying to do, because South Africans don't trust. I mean, to be honest, even I personally, by the way, when I imagine Julius Malema being president of South Africa and I think of the future of my children, I get very scared. So Julius is aware that we are scared. So he's trying to woo us, for us to think of him as a possible responsible person in government.
Okay, and obviously, as we head close to the election, we're seeing, the DA, they seem to have topped out at 20%. We've discussed ad nauseum the fact that they've given up the idea of growing because they're just not selling a product that's going to grow into the big rump of the market, which is the black voter. Right? They seem to be a party just purely for minorities, either by race or by class.
Yeah, look, the DA, remember Tony Leon said Mmusi Maimane was an experiment gone wrong, and I'm using Tony Leon's own words. And indeed, Mmusi was an experiment in the sense that was the first black leader of the DA. So they decided to go back to the original DA, which is a party for white people, period. They are not apologetic about it. In the Western Cape, by the way, they used to give the premier to a white person and the mayor of Cape Town to a colored person. So they understood that they needed to placate both voters. They have decided that they're no longer doing that. We have a premier who's white and a mayor who is white, because they believe that colored people now believe in white people. But Gayton McCain is showing them flames in the Western Cape. So they are scared. But here's the thing. If the DA continues to behave and operate as if they are a party for white people, they will dwindle, and they will never gain power in South Africa. Yeah. That's the bottom line. Yeah. And that's the corner into which they have painted themselves now.
Yeah. So moving forward, as we say that the DA isn't setting itself up for growth, the EFF messaging seems to not be resonating in as much as half the country doesn't want to become revolutionaries. And that's why the polls are putting them somewhere around that level that they've achieved in the past. With the ANC down, the big question mark became Umkhonto weSizwe. You rightly called it the last time we had on the weekly update when we were talking about at that point the big news, which was the firing of the founder, Khumalo. And you said the reason is that Zuma wants to run this as a family project, but that has really become real, hasn't it?
Yeah, but and I read the comments after our discussion. People were insulting me, but this thing has now come to pass. Zuma has set up this outfit for his children. If you look at the most vocal spokespersons of the party, it's his children.
Yeah.
And as I said last week, Duduzane Zuma once told us that he is the future president of South Africa. So this outfit, he sees it as that instrument that he can use to become South Africa's president. So this is nothing more than a family affair for the Zumas. That's why anybody else who has ambitions, who's not a Zuma, is going to be elbowed out of the outfit. But I'll repeat what I said previously. This is not a sustainable project. When Zuma becomes senile or when he dies, and these things will happen very soon, by the way, we know the man is old. This thing is going to fall apart. It will come down crumbling like a house of cards. So people who think that there's a party here, they are actually deluding themselves.
Yeah, and I know at one point polls had them up as high as, double figures. That seems to have pared back. We now have them polling somewhere in the high 8 and 9%.
Yeah, it is because of the ructions.
Yes.
I mean, think of it. Over the past month or so, what has come out of Umkhonto weSizwe party? It's negative news after negative news. Nothing positive. It's about them fighting. So voters are beginning to ask themselves, is this a real party? Remember, South Africa is cursed with a litany of parties that were destroyed by internal fights, from COPE to Ahang, you name them. So South Africans are beginning to say, this is another COPE. because the fights are on as we speak. That's why you can see that the polling of MK is actually declining, because South Africans are beginning to doubt. And they are correct. This stuff is real. The Zuma and members of his family and others are busy fighting.
Right. And moving away from the polls, because polls seem to have settled around the numbers that we discussed, obviously some of the slack is going to be some of the votes that should be going to opposition parties that are not arriving at the DA's door or the EFF's door is going to go somewhere. Does this mean that for the first time in a while, it looks like there could be some hope for those new parties? Because if you just do the numbers, there seems to be around about 15% floating around.
Yeah, here is a bigger picture for South Africa politically. We had two dominant political parties. Actually, we had one dominant political party. Let's be honest about it, the ANC. The ANC is not being replaced by another dominant political party. South Africa politically is fracturing. So in other words, as the ANC collapses, fragments of the ANC are going in different places. That is what is happening. So you will see the IFP in KZN gaining a bit. You will see the EFF gaining a bit. You will see parties like MK gaining a bit. You will see Action SA in Gauteng gaining a bit. You will see Gayton Mackenzie gaining a bit. All of those are fragments coming from the ANC. So the future of South African politics looks like this, if I were to paint a picture for you. Instead of three colors of the ANC, you are now going to have a kaleidoscope of colors representing many fragments. And our political future is going to be disorganized, chaotic, and noisy.
Yeah. And in closing, one of the other net results of this is that quite softly, without a lot of fanfare and trumpeting, we are seeing the exit, the final curtain for the struggle generation.
Oh yes, oh yes. I mean, if you look at the ANC, people like Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, that generation, are exiting. Pravin Gordhan. This is the end of the struggle generation. The struggle generation did two things. If we write the last chapter about them, one, they contributed to the liberation of South Africa, in particular the black majority. That's positive. Two, in 1994, they lied. They said politics was about principle. The time has now shown us that they were lying, because this very same struggle generation began to steal money from the public. So those are two things that they did. The last thing, they introduced a younger generation, the generation of Fikile Mbalula and others. That generation does not even pretend that politics is about principle. Their politics is about a G-Wagon. That's the new politics. So South Africa must get ready for the politics of the G-Wagon.
Yeah. And of course, we're going to see a complete shake-up within Parliament. New speaker, new deputy speaker. The one speaker is going to be in jail or certainly tied up in court forever. The deputy, Lechesa Tsenoli, has announced his retirement. So it's going to be all changed. And Prince, just in closing, I'd like you just to explain what Parliament looks like from June this year, June 2024, compared to before. Right? What is it going to look like without an ANC supermajority versus what we've become accustomed to in the past?
It's going to look like a negotiated settlement. That's what Parliament is going to look like. It's going to be a real Parliament for the first time in a long time, because every bill, every meeting of the Portfolio Committee will have to be negotiated first before anything can move forward. If you don't negotiate, you don't get anything. That, for me, by the way, is the positive thing that we must take out of this election.
So we'd rather have that than one party that can just make rules arbitrarily. If they decide to pass some bit of law, in the past the ANC could do it.
Here's the thing. The ANC comrades used to lock themselves up in a boardroom alone and decide that they're going to steal our money. This election is now opening that door to say, you, the comrades, there will be people in that boardroom that you don't like. So you will no longer talk alone. So those people are going to be in that boardroom. When the comrades say, let's steal, they say, oh, wait. So we should be happy as South Africans that finally we are kicking that door open, and some people are going to get there and disturb the comrades who were busy stealing.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is the importance of what you're going to be voting for in the next couple of weeks. Please get out there and vote. Think carefully as to who deserves your vote. We'll keep on giving you the news here at the State of the Nation. Prince Mashele, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you to Pace Car Rental for allowing us for supporting us and keeping us on air. And to everybody that's enjoyed this, we'll see you next time on the Weekly Update.